Well, hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Johnny and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. And this is going to be part 4 of our M60A3 with the Bulldozer attachment by TACOM. And it's in 1/35 scale. So we're going to be working on the turret. And there's a whole lot of parts that needs to go into this turret and the commander's cupola and some photo etch and all that good stuff. So we'll be beginning with step 22, which is where we left off in the last video. So let's go ahead, jump down to the bench, and get started on this. So, a quick look at our instructions here. Now, this is step 22 where we start building up our turret. And we do have some holes that we need to drill, and these are to be drilled in 0.8 millimeter. And that's for fuel cans and antenna mounts and accessories. So, first thing I'm going to go ahead and do here is take a permanent marker and with the referencing our instructions and paying close attention to it, we're going to mark out each one that we need to drill. We don't need to be drilling out the wrong holes here. Next up, we'll select the right size bit, our 0.8 millimeter. And using our Tamiya handy drill, we'll go ahead and drill out all these holes. It's always good to double check your work before you start drilling. We don't need anything that we'll have to fill later on. And of course, since we drilled these from the back side out to the front side, or the side that we're going to actually see, we're going to have to clean up these holes right at the exit point there. Another thing that I do like to do before we get a lot of paint on the actual vehicle is to check the fit. And oftentimes these lugs that hold our turret to the hull or the commander's cupola to the top of the turret may be too tight. And so we want to relieve as much of that as we can so that it fits perfectly. Now, you don't have to do this. Some modelers just cut those off completely, but I do like to have the security of having those tabs in place. Speaking of the commander's cupola, we do need to check that one as well. And as you can see, although it fits, once we get paint on the turret and on the commander's cupola, that fit is going to tighten up considerably. So we do need to make sure that we've got plenty of room there. That way we won't have too many adjustments to make in the future, if any at all. So next up, we can join, or I would like to join anyway, these two halves of our turret. One thing that we need to do before we commit to doing this is take a look through our instructions. And what we're looking for is any parts that need to be installed into the interior of the turret before we cement the bottom section of the turret on. And as you can see here, the way our canvassed mantlet goes onto the turret, there are no moving parts or any anchors or anything like that that needs to be installed. So we can safely go ahead and get the turret put together. Now, by doing it this way, we eliminate breaking off little fragile things like grab handles and handrails and grenade launchers and all that. So that way we can go ahead and glue it together and take care of the seam if there's any areas that needs our attention. So I started at the back of the turret because that was the best fit, and then we just simply work around. It is possible to kind of mismatch the seam just a little bit, so we get that as flush as possible, and then while it is still a little bit gooey from using the Tamiya Extra Thin, we can kind of blend that a little bit there. And it fits pretty good. So next up, we have all these little parts to start putting on our turret. So we'll go ahead and start with that. First up is a little bit of an extension where the turret evacuation fan armored cover goes. And then we can put the cover on for that as well. And that is a D style peg and locator so that all of our bolt holes line up correctly. And then we can continue putting on some of the small parts. We have our lifting eye that needs to go onto the roof section of the turret. And we'll just go ahead and put that on. And there's also a small latch. Now this is for one of the radio aerials that we'll be putting on. So we just need to put that on and make sure that it's vertical and facing the right direction. And next up, I don't know what this part what this part's called, but we're gonna put it on too, making sure that we don't have a big gap or a seam there. Now we do have a bracket here to install, and this is going to hold the loop for our limited fire for our commander's cupola. And next up, we do have the periscope attachment as well as our rangefinder. So we'll just press that into place, and a little bit, it's me extra thin. Next up is this handrail here. There are little square locator marks along the side of the turret where this handrail goes. There's no holes or anything like that, so we do need to put it into place. I just start with one bracket and just move it down the line, making sure that everything lines up nicely, and finishing it off there at the end. It does have to be bowed in just a little bit to fit the profile of the turret, but that looks pretty good. And unlike some other kits in 1/35th scale, this handrail here is true to scale. So next up, we're going to use a little bit of this acrylic black from Vallejo, and I'm going to paint the back side of, well, it's not really a periscope, it's part of a sighting system here. So this would be the periscope and sighting system, and it has something to do with the rangefinder as well, I believe, for the gunner. So we're going to paint the back side of it, and also we have masked the front of it. It's better now to do it than to wait later on, which would make it more difficult. So on to step 23. We've got our loader's hatch to do, and also some other small parts that we're going to be installing. So first up, we'll work on our loader's hatch. Now this is a swivel plate for the loader's periscope, and we'll install that. Also, there is a handle on the bottom side. I'm going to go ahead and put it on there, but we're never going to see it. Next up, we can slide our periscope into place. Just want to make sure that it's perpendicular to the actual hatch, and that way the angle is correct, and we'll just cement that into place. And we also have these really tiny caps that goes on to the hinge section there of our loader's hatch. Really nice bolt detail on that. And then, of course, there is a small grab handle that goes onto the front edge of the hatch. Now, I have left the sprue gate. The sprue gate, we've left that on that small handle. It'll be easier to clean up later on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mask up this periscope as well. It's easier to do it now than it's going to be once it's on the model. And then after we're done painting, we can just peel these masks off. But I just want to make sure that you guys understand that it's so much easier to line those up. And once again, we'll just be painting the back side of the periscope, that flat black acrylic too, before we start installing any other parts onto the hatch. So we have a couple of small parts to put on, some antenna bases, and they go on just as you would expect. We're just being careful to make sure that everything is perpendicular to the turret roof the way it should be. No odd angles or anything leaning over. And we have this large antenna to put on too. First of all, the base will go on. Now, it goes on in place of two of those holes that we previously drilled. TACOM did not drill those for us. And of course, we have our armored cover for our gunner's sight and periscope. And we will cement that into place. And of course that main antenna there that we had talked about before, that goes into place, making sure that it's not oddly leaning anyway. So next up we have this, it's kind of a tubular, I don't know what to call it exactly. What it is it's the guard that keeps the 50 cal that's mounted in the commander's cupola from getting over to the point to where you can actually shoot your main gun tube. So it's a protective device. And next up, we can go ahead and put our loader's hatch into place, and we can cement that in. Now there is a cover that goes on towards the inside of the hinge, and we'll cement that in. And of course we have a small cover that goes on over top of our periscope, and we can put that one on as well. And of course we have our front lifting eyelets there for the turret. Now TACOM does have each one of these numbered separately. They got a different number, but I can't really tell the difference between the two. But I do keep them separated just to make sure that we get those installed on the side that TACOM intended them to go. So next up, we can go back and address these sprue gates that we have left on on the grab handle of our turret, as well as that protective ring or loop for our 50 cal. So that's kind of a limit of fire protection device there. And once we get that sprue gate cut off, we can go ahead and without any worry of losing it, we can sand that down. So in step 24, we start with our grenade launcher and fuel cans and stuff like that. We also have these 12 little bitty PE parts to bend and to put on. And those hold our tow cables, which we'll have to make up as well, because TACOM has supplied us with a copper cable to use. So we'll start with our smoke grenade launchers, and they are made up of 3 pieces. We have our bracket, then the launcher base, and then of course we have the launchers themselves, which is all one cast piece, and we'll just glue those up. The fit is really nice. We don't have anything to worry about there. One of the things that I decided to do was to kind of drill these out. I just went through my drill bit set and found a drill bit that matched the diameter of the opening. That way we can drill these out and give it some extra depth. As you can see here, I've drilled out the one on the left versus the kit part on the right, which hasn't been drilled out. And that extra depth really gives us that shadow look, and that's really going to enhance how these look on the actual vehicle. Next up, we have our fuel cans, and it's a simple 2-sided affair here. And of course, we'll have our cap and our handle to put on later. We will go ahead and glue these up, but as you can see, we do have a noticeable seam. And I think probably the best thing to do is to clean that up. We're going to sand it down first and make it flush. And then the next thing to do is to come in with some Mr. Surfacer 500 here. And I'm just going to use a toothpick and just lay Mr. Surfacer down along that seam. And we'll go ahead and do all of our cans up at the same time. And that way everything can dry, and then we can attend to these and get them sanded down properly. And this kit does have 2 fuel cans, and I think there's 4 water jugs, all of them with their little mounts to put them on the vehicle. I think it's best to go ahead and do them all at the same time. It's just much easier that way. Now here I'm using a panel line saw. This is to me a panel line saw photo etch type, just to reestablish that fine line there around the top of the fuel cans. And of course, you know, it got a little bit of filler in there, the Mr. Surfacer 500, when we were taking care of the seam. So we can just reestablish that with that saw. Next up, we can glue our handles on. Now, I have not cleaned up the sprue gates on these the handles yet. I think it's just much easier because they really fine detail here, and they're so thin they would be easy to break. So we'll do that after the cement has set up, and then of course put the cap in place and cement it into place too. Next up, after everything has dried well enough, we can take care of that little cleaning detail there, those teeny tiny sprue gates, and kind of sand and smooth those out. And with that done, we can go ahead and start working on these little PE parts that we've got here. So there's 12 of them that we have to make up, and they're all supposed to be identical. So we're going to do the best we can to make sure that they're as close to identical as possible. So in preparation for doing PE, I like to cut mine on a piece of glass. And then our PE that comes in the set has a double clear plastic. It's coated on both sides. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So we're going to leave it on the back side and just peel the front off. And then we can go ahead and place that on the glass. And it makes it easier to cut through the PE connection points here on the fret without bending up the actual PE part. And once we've got it cut free, we can just pull off one part at a time and work with them without fear of losing the others. They're still stuck to that sticky backside there. So next up, I have this rather large pink eraser, which is a really nice, smooth, soft surface. So what we're going to do is we're kind of sizing up what kind of bend we need to make. So I select a small drill bit to use as a bending mandrel. And we're going to start our bend on the lower third of the actual part. And then using some strong straight edge tweezers, we're going to bend that around, and we want one side of it to be longer than the other. So I'm just going to check here and make sure that it fits well with the cable and also with the ends that goes on our tow cables, because these are going to be kind of clipped in there. And as you can see, that's kind of the shape that we want. We want one side long. The long side will be the side that we're going to glue to the turret. Now, there is no bolt detail on these, so we don't have to worry about that. They're welded in place. So with 12 of these made up, and I haven't lost any, so we're in good shape there, we can go ahead and start gluing those into place. And for that, we're going to be using our medium CA glue. And I just grip the part with my tweezers. Try not to squeeze it too hard because we don't need these flying off for the carpet monster. I don't need to feed him today. And the long side gets glued right onto the turret. Now there are some little bitty molded in dashes along the side and the back of the turret where all of these go. So with all of those secured into place, we can move on to the next step. And that would be to attach our grenade launcher. And it does have these little rectangular indicators that are molded into the side of the actual turret, where those go. Now those brackets were welded onto the turret as well, so we don't have to worry about any marks or anything to clean up. And then some of the holes that we did drill into the turret is for the storage boxes for our actual smoke grenades. And we'll just cement those into place. So next up, we need to build up our cable. And of course, the hole is always a little bit smaller than you can comfortably insert that cable. So I'm just going to drill it out a little bit. I'm not sure. I think it's like a number 60 bit. But we're just going to give ourselves a little bit of extra room there so that the cable is not so tight. We don't want any strands being pushed out from the cable. We want everything to be inserted. So the instructions wants us to cut these in 70 millimeter lengths. So I marked it at 70 millimeters. And now we're just going to glue one end on, using that same medium CA glue to glue that end on. And once that has taken hold there, and it just takes a few seconds, it's ready to go. Then we can go ahead and we want to check the length. I'm afraid that might be a little bit long. That 70 millimeters might be more than what we really want. So as you can see, this other eyelet is supposed to clip onto that photo etch. And so it's about 4 millimeters too long, so we're not going to cut them at 70. We're going to cut them 4 millimeters short. So that puts us at what, 66? If my hillbilly math is correct, that'll be 66 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and cut that off. Now, don't use your sprue cutters for this. Use a pair of wire cutters. And then we can go ahead and cement the end on. And we want to double check the fit. Now, if it's just slightly too long, that's fine. Too short would be a problem, but we do want to check this before we commit to doing the other cable. And this seems to be the right length for that wire. It should be that cable should be stretched around the turret. So next, I think before we commit to cutting the other one, we'll take the one that we've already got made up and just simply put it onto the other side of the turret and make sure that everything is going to line up correctly. And it does. So the spacing is exact from the left side to the right side from where we've glued up those little hooks that we made. So with the other cable made up, we'll go ahead and put those into place, and that's what it's going to look like. Now, we're not going to cement them into place yet. We'll do that after everything's painted. So moving on in our instructions, we're up to step 25, and we're going to start working on the 50 cal that goes into our commander's cupola, along with the hatch and all those other parts there. So our 50 does have its own mantlet, which is canvas covered, and we have a small backing piece that we need to glue into place. And then we can go ahead and, according to the instructions, we go ahead and put the gun on. Now, you have two options here. You can do it with or without the cover. I've chosen to go with that canvas cover, so the parts are a little bit different there. Now, just using my steel rule, I just want to kind of eyeball and try to make sure that the gun is pointing straight. So next up, we have the cover that goes over the commander's periscope and sight. And I am going to select the open position, so I have left that little number on the part itself so I didn't get it mixed up with anything else. And with that glued on in the open position, we have a small piece of PE to put on the side of the commander's periscope cover, as well as a larger piece of PE that goes on to the rear of that housing. And we're just using medium CA glue to attach these parts because, as you probably already know, the To Me Extra Thin will not securely hold any of these metal parts onto the plastic. So with that done, looks nice. I always like the look of PE. So we're going to start working on the actual cupola, or cupola if depending upon which way you prefer to pronounce it. There is a cylinder piece that gets cemented in first, and then we have the swivel portion to put in, or actually the elevation, the gun elevation piece here, which we need to check the fit on, just to make sure that everything's going to line up correctly. And I believe we're going to be okay there. I always like to double check these parts, especially if you're not real sure how those parts made up. So that's kind of how those parts join. So we do have a small armored cover that needs to go on first. So we'll go ahead and cement that into place, and then make sure that it's completely flush against the edge of the housing there. We don't need any gaps there. Get that pressed in. There we go. And now we can take a look. We can get all these parts in, but we do have a small issue here where we're going to have to kind of forcibly hold one side of this together as we glue it up. So I'm starting over on the right side because it lines up very well. And we're just going to kind of run our Tamiya extra thin, just a little bit at a time, right around the edge of it until we get it all the way around. That will enable us to make sure that these two halves, the bottom, well, it's not really a half, but the bottom section is well mated, and we can kind of, you got to kind of press it in to get those edges to meet rather than to overlap one another. They need to meet in a nice sharp detail there. So I'm just getting my finger in the right spot there to where I can get the pressure on it. And then, of course, I'll have to hold it in place because you can't really get a clamp onto this uneven surface. Now, once that has set up for us, we can go ahead, and there's a small gap that closes up very nicely right on the front. Now, once that's dry, or at least dry enough, we do have some small, one's a small little hole where the two halves go together, and then there's some spots where we cut them off the sprue gates and kind of pinched out a little bit of plastic there. So when it comes to our swivel part, it is just a little bit too long on this one edge here. So it doesn't really swivel up inside the bottom portion of the cupola like it's supposed to. So we'll just fix that by sanding that down. And once we get enough clearance, we can just reinsert that piece and then get it to rotate around, because it is supposed to close up that gap in the very bottom. With that done, we can go ahead and cement this into place. Now, it's not going to move. We're not going to be able to elevate the gun because of that canvas. So, but that'll be fine. And just like we've done on the previous periscopes, on this one, we will go ahead and mask that up. It's so much easier to get to now, especially this one. This one has a extended cover that goes over it. And then we'll paint the back side of it as well. That way we won't have any really weird light reflections or anything going on there. Not that we'd be able to see it, but we just want to make sure that we don't run into anything like that. Next up, we'll put the hatch into place. And here I can reach it fairly well, so we'll just cement that from the underside. Now we have a small latch that goes into place here. And of course, with all these little bitty parts, we want to make sure that we've got the correct alignment. And now we can put the cover over the commander's periscope there. And that's the one with the, we chose to do the open version. Next up, we have some really small caps here for the hinge. for the commander's hatch. It's got some nice bolt detail on it, but these parts are extremely small, so we have to be very careful not to lose these. Now there are some lifting eyes that we need to secure to the outside of this. And I have left the sprue gates long on these as well, except for this particular one right here, which I lost. So the carpet monster did eat something after all, but I made that out of a small piece of wire, and it looks pretty decent. We'll never know the difference once it's painted up. Of course, it has to be CA glued on, but it'll be fine. As for the other two lifting eyes, though, since we left those sprues on, sprue gates, I should say, on kind of long there, which really helps in alignment and not losing them, we'll have to cut and trim those up. So next up, we'll move on to the opposite side of the turret and attach all that stuff there. The only one that we really need to pay attention to that's different is this bracket. So this bracket is part of the bustle rack, so we do need to put it on and make sure that it's fully seated because the bustle rack has to line up with it. Alright, so next up is, let's see, we're in step 26, so that is our bustle rack here. And then of course we have all those parts that are identical from the opposite side. The only thing that we need to really look at as far as assembly is there is one little mark on the side of the turret that seems to be misplaced. I don't know if there's supposed to be a different bracket or something for a different version, but it just kind of sits out there by itself. So I'm just going to remove that little rectangular locator and kind of scrape that down because I don't want that interfering with our paint or our weathering process. It might look a bit out of place, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. And then we'll just go ahead and attach our smoke grenade launcher, same way as we did on the opposite side. So now we can concentrate on our bustle rack, and as you can see there's quite a few parts to go to put this thing together. And of course we need to start by taking care of our photo etch first. And we will go ahead and cut this out just like we did the photo etch for those little bitty brackets that we made up, using the piece of glass to help support it because we don't want to bend these pieces up. Since they are large, it helps to take your hobby knife and just slide it up underneath it. That way we're not pulling it at an odd angle and bending it. Next up, there is going to be a little nub left where we cut it loose from the photo etch fret. So we do need to go ahead and clean these up, and they very easily sand off. And as you can see, I'm sanding with the part and not across it. That way we don't bend that up. Next up, we need to anneal this, but we need to be very careful when we do because this is really thin brass photo etch, and if you concentrate your fire in one spot, you can actually melt through it. We just need to do it, get enough heat on it for it to change color for us. As you can see, I did try to bend it a little bit, and it just wants to spring back. So annealing it makes it much softer and much easier to work with. So TACOM has this bending jig that allows us to bend those curves. So what we're going to want to do is make sure that we get this bent so that it fits this jig exactly. That'll give us the best possible opportunity to install it without any issues. Now, it does need to be rolled a little bit. So I'm just using the handle out of my craft knife here, and just very lightly. Since we've annealed it, it will bend rather readily. So the ends need to be curled a little bit more than what you can do on the jig. The jig will get us started, but we're just going to have to bend it using that pink eraser and rolling it on there. until it's a nice snug fit. And with it fit, there we go. It's ready to go. So all of these brackets, we got 4 of these brackets. I've left the numbers on them so that we don't mix these up. They need to go right where TACOM says they need to go. So we will cut those numbers off. Those are the sprue numbers, and install them one at a time. Now for the bottom railing, where the bottom photo etch is going to go, it does have those little circular, what are we going to call those? Locators, where our brackets actually go. So we just need to kind of snap that into place, put a little bit of TACOM extra thin on it, and then we'll come back and make sure that they're fully seated, because we don't need them protruding up above the brackets. They just need to sit in their slots. And we'll continue on down the line with each one of the brackets according to the instructions and the numbered bracket that we need to use for that location. And we'll put them on one at a time. We don't want to get any of these mixed up, because if we do, then it's not going to fit onto the turret the way it's supposed to. And just a reminder, after you put the TACOM extra thin on your bracket, do go back and make sure that it is fully seated. That way we won't have any issues that we've created anyway. So when it comes time to put our photo etch in, one of the things I noticed is it doesn't quite set flat because of those little locators. As you can see here, those little rings where the brackets are located kind of protrude up above the surface of it. So we just need to trim those off. It doesn't take much, just a little bit. And we'll just scrape those right off, and then the photo etch fits just fine. We don't need it to be buckled when we set this down and try to glue it up to not only the brackets, but also those bottom rails. And to attach this photo etch, of course, we need to use our medium CA glue. Just doing them one bracket at a time and making sure that it's got full contact. And we'll just press them down into place. Easy peasy. So next, we need to add this center rail on our bustle rack, because it's not going to be, we're not going to be able to put it in if we try to put the photo etch part of the basket in first. And we're going to go ahead and attach this the same way that we did the brackets earlier, and just work our way from one bracket to the next, making sure that this rail is in place and fully seated. And then we can take and put our sides of our basket into place here, the photo etch. Just need to curl it just a little bit and it'll pop right in there. Now we're not going to glue this part of the photo etch yet, because I think the best thing to do is to actually get the bustle rack into place, and then we can come back and use the CA glue and attach those photo etch pieces together. Now the reason why I've chosen to do it this way is because without the side of that basket photo etch being glued into place, the rest of the bustle rack is really kind of flimsy. So by attaching it to the turret, we add a lot of stability, and it makes it a lot stiffer so that we're not bending it around in place when we go to press down on that photo etch. So we just start with one bracket and just move along and make sure that each one of the brackets are fully seated. And as we work our way out, we can attach the rails to that end bracket that we put on previously. So that is a peg and hole type of arrangement, and it goes on very positively. No issues there. But now when we get over to the other side, it is a little circular indicator where these rails on our bustle rack need to go. So they need to actually go inside that little bitty circle. So we just put a little bit of me extra thin there and glue those up. Now we can start working on the basket itself. Because of the way this thing is bent, it kind of leaves a gap, and there's not anything that I can do about that gap. You just can't really pull it together because of the way this thing is made. It's just, I just felt it was better to have it secure on the bottom and kind of leave that little gap there. So that's kind of what I did. The bustle rack actually angles out towards the top, but this photo etch wasn't really designed to do that. So we're just kind of stuck with what we got, but it doesn't look too bad. So you guys will have to be the judge of that. Anyway, with that photo etch side done, we can go ahead and attach the top rail, and it attaches the same as the previous rail did. And there it is, all glued up. Now, I did find, and these parts aren't included in the instructions, but they are on the sprues, on the end sprue. And these are little mounts for additional fuel cans or water cans, and there are actually indications of where these go between the brackets there. So one goes there, and then another one goes right there. Now they are a little bit over length there, a little bit too long, so we'll just sand these down a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and add these brackets because I think it's going to look pretty good. We can add water cans and all kinds of stuff to it. So since the part's already included in the kit, I think it would be a good idea to go ahead and put these on. So we'll just cement these into place, and that'll complete our bustle rack assembly. So with that done, we can move on to step 27, which is our main armament, and also our mantlet cover, and we got some small pieces, or some holes that we need to fill, rather, and 3 small pieces, I guess, to put on it. First of all, we'll start off with the main armament, gluing our gun tube together. It does go together fine. You just need to be careful that you don't get this crooked, because you can cement it up in such a way that it would kind of curve off to one side, and we don't want it curving off to one side. We need our gun tube straight so we can shoot straight later on. So, and I am using clothespins here to hold it all together, and there is a muzzle end that we need to put in as well. Now I've chosen to use this gun tube because it has the heat shields on it. So next up is our mantlet cover, and that's that canvas look. It is 3 pieces that we need to cement up in order to give it that really, really nice look. And then we need to go back in and fill up all of the little holes that are not used in this version. So I'm just using the perfect plastic putty for that and getting it into the main seam there between our parts, and then all of those little locator holes that we're not using in this version. And as with a water-soluble putty that we're using here, the perfect plastic putty, a wet Q-tip or cotton bud works very well for cleaning up the excess. And then if we need to address any little areas, we can just use a toothpick to do that. So we do have our coax machine gun hood that needs to go into place, and it is a D-shaped hole and peg, and so we'll put those in. And then of course there are lifting eyelets that are covered by the mantlet cover, so those need to be cemented into place, and it just looks like they're covered with canvas. So we don't really want a visible seam, so we just need to make sure that we cement those in place. Also, there are these brackets for a searchlight, which the A3 version, it had the brackets, but it did not have the light. The light was deleted from it, but the brackets are still present, so we'll go ahead and put those 3 brackets into place and just make sure that they're not crooked. So giving our gun tube plenty of time to set up, we can go back and clean that up. Now we're not going to attach the gun tube yet to our mantlet cover because we actually have some PE that goes right around it, and it's going to be much easier to do that without that gun tube in our way, or at least I think it is. So that's the route that I'm going to go. We can always put the gun tube on later. So next up, we need to go ahead and attach our mantlet with cover into place. And as you can see, that little ledge that goes all the way around the mantlet cover is where that PE is going to go. So we're going to just put a little bit of the CA glue there. That's the medium strength CA glue that we're using. And then we can fit our little thin PE part that I have managed to not distort yet. I'm just gluing the top section of it first. And I have 2 cocktail sticks, one for gluing and one for pressing it down. And I put tape on the one for pressing it down. That way I didn't get them mixed up. And it's so thin, it bends easily. We don't need to anneal this part. We just need to press it one section at a time. So with the top secured, we can do the sides. And we'll press the sides down. And then we'll continue on around the entire mantlet there, pressing it down as we go. And give that CA glue a little bit of time there to actually attach to it. And I really think that this is probably the best approach for attaching this really, really thin piece of PE. Otherwise, if we try to bend it ahead of time, it would probably come out all mangled. So this worked out very well. So I'm really happy with that result. Now we can go ahead and attach that gun tube. A little bit of to me extra thin there, and we just press the gun tube into place and make sure that it's fully seated and there's no gap there where it meets the mantlet. Now we do have a couple of other extra parts that are in the kit, and these are spare road wheels, which will probably look good on the kit. So we just got to figure out where we want to put them. So I'm just going to go ahead and make these parts up, and it might be some nice stowage accessories there for our bustle rack. As you can see, they'll fit right down in there. And it's not included in the instructions. And we also have some extra water cans that are in the kit that we can attach to those spare brackets that were in the kit as well that we put on. And there we are. I went ahead and put the turret onto the hull, and that's it. That's it for the build. So it looks really good. I'm really pleased with how it's all come out, and I think TACOM did a really good job here with the design of this kit. The parts fit really well, and what few little fit issues we did have may have been a storage issue with the kit and not TACOM at all. Well, all right, there we are. So we managed to finish our turret, and I got all that photo etch on there, and that looks really good. And with the addition, of course, of these can holders for our fuel cans or water cans or whatever we want to put on it, and the commander's cupola too. That's all done. So in our next video, which will be part 5, we're going to start painting. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Got several colors to put on, so that's going to be very interesting. So special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I keep making these videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you did, don't forget to give it a like. And if you're new to the channel and not a subscriber, I hope that today I earned that subscription. So until I see you for part 5, you guys stay safe.